Good morning and welcome to the first in a new series of talks around the book of Daniel. And if you want a New Testament context in which to investigate the stories in Daniel, you can do a lot worse than the first reading that we had from John's Gospel, which is all about being in the world but not of the world. And as we look at the challenges that are given to Daniel and therefore the challenges that come to us as a result, we can know that Jesus absolutely understands this dilemma of being in the world but not of the world. And he prays to God, he says to God, don't take my disciples out of the world, otherwise they're no use. Leave them in the world, but protect them. And as we look at Daniel, we'll begin to see that this was the pattern of the things that happened in the Old Testament as well as the New Testament. But before we get there, here's a little quiz for you. Can you tell me the link between these these Old Testament Bible characters and New Testament Bible characters? There's 6 Bible characters up there. Can you work out the link between those? Jesus, obviously. Moses, originally, I think. Samson, dramatically. Esther, interestingly. Joseph, lyrically. Noah, funnily. Have you worked out the link? Yeah, I know you do it there. The clue is on the right-hand side of that slide. They have all had films, big feature films, made of their lives. And the question I ask myself is, how comes Daniel's not there? What's wrong with Daniel? Because Daniel's stories are brilliant. Every year, Scripture Union used to, I don't know if they still do, but they used to produce a booklet, actually quite a significant book actually, along with a video or a DVD, to help churches run holiday Bible clubs. And they were brilliant, they were really good fun. And one of my favourites was the one they did about the story of Daniel. And I did that story loads and loads of times. Partly because of the song I remember when I was a kid. I'm going to try this out, Steve, so I'm going to stick with it. There was a song called Dare to be a Daniel. Okay, Tim's nodding, so me and Tim. Does anyone else remember the song Dare to be a Daniel? Or 6. Yes. 6. Including your wife, Steve. So Steve was right, we wouldn't have got away with singing it. But it was a great song, Dare to be a Daniel. And I love this word dare and all the sort of connotations that go with it, partly because I think I was brought up on Second World War movies, Dam Busters and Cockle Shell Heroes and 633 Squadrons and all that sort of stuff. And so I love this word, dare. And so when we came to Dare to be a Daniel, I love the story of Daniel, so I got a lot out of it. And as a teacher, I've told off plenty of kids in my time. And when you tell kids off, you often ask them the question, why do you do it? And they come up with the top 3 answers. And the top 3 answers are, number 1, he made me do it. Which is a bit of a sad one, because then you have to investigate the possibility of bullying and collusion, all that sort of stuff. The next favourite one is, I didn't mean to. So the fact that you've painted your name in 4-foot high letters all around the school hall was done by accident, was it? But my favourite one is, he dared me to. And if a kid ever said to me, he dared me to, the chances are they will get off. But as a teacher, you know what you should do as a teacher. As a teacher, if a child ever says to you, he dared me to, what you're supposed to say is, so if he dared you to jump off a cliff, would you do it? I had to stop doing that when I once said that to a kid. If he dared you to jump off a cliff, would you do it? And the kid stopped and thought and went, do you know what? If the tide was in and there was enough water, I'd definitely give it a go. So I had to stop doing that. So let's have a closer look at the book of Daniel. So the book of Daniel is in 2 parts. And the first half of it is the stories that we know so well. The fiery furnace, the writing on the wall, the lion's den, so much potential for a great film. But I'm going to tell you in a minute why Daniel never had a film made for him. And the stories themselves revolve around these 4 people. And I can really relate to these 4 young men for all sorts of reasons. And if you look at the part in the Bible which talks about the 4 young men, you will understand why I can relate to them. It says this: they were young men without any physical defect, handsome, showing aptitude for every kind of learning, well informed and quick to understand. And you can begin to... That was my wife's cough, that was. I'm surprised I only got one cough actually. But there we go, these four young men. And the story starts in a fairly sad way, in that God's special people, the Hebrew people, the Jewish people, are taken and they are captured. But the interesting thing about this is that the rest of the book of Daniel cannot happen without what happens in chapter 1. And there are two pairs of key words that make everything make sense. And as we're going to go through the book of Daniel, we'll look at these two pairs of key words. So the story starts with God's people being defeated, and this period of defeat comes in waves. And the wave we are at now is probably the most devastating wave. Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, comes to Jerusalem and takes away the best of the best. And that's in terms of people as well as goods, and even stuff from the temple. He takes away the best to take back to Babylon. And in taking Daniel and his four friends, that is a very clever tactic. Because what he does is he takes the best of the best away from Jerusalem back to Babylon and tries to assimilate them into the Babylonian way of life. And that's very clever, because if he had left them in Jerusalem, Daniel and his three friends would have been the sort of people, because of their popularity, their skills, their intelligence, who would have caused all sorts of problems for Nebuchadnezzar. So he takes them away and puts them into his own kingdom in Babylon. And what we get now is we get for Daniel and the friends a time of major change. We get a change in their home, in the language they're speaking, in the culture that they are being there for, in the food that they're eating, in their new boss, in their names even. And as you look at those parts of the Bible, you can see all of those. And the names are really important as well. In fact, all of these were big, big things, but the names are really important. Here are God-fearing people who've got God-fearing names that say so much about the real God, and their names are changed. So Daniel, whose name means God is my judge, becomes Belteshazzar, which means protect the king's life. Hananiah, the Lord is gracious, becomes Shadrach, commander of Aku, which was one of the Babylonian gods. Mishael, who is what God is, becomes Meshach, who is what Aku is. Azariah, the Lord has helped, becomes Abednego, servant of Nego, a god of the Babylonians as well. And I'll ask you a question. If all of those things in your life were being changed, where would you have drawn the line? There was a series of jokes that went around a number of years ago called the light bulb jokes. Do you remember those? How many people does it take to change a light bulb? You remember those here? My favourite couple were these. How many politicians does it take to change a light bulb? 2. One to change the light bulb, and a second one to come back and change it to just what it was before. So, how many grandchildren does it take to change a light bulb? 1. He holds the light bulb, and the whole world revolves around him. My other favourite one was, how many Anglicans does it take to change a light bulb? 10. For Daniel then, it was the food. He decided to make his stand on the food. And there's a number of really good reasons why Daniel would do this. The rest of the stuff, the having to change home, the language, the culture, the new boss and the name, were all things that were being done to Daniel. And he had very little option. He couldn't do much about those. The thing he could do something about was what he was putting into his mouth. And what he was putting into his mouth, this food, was almost certainly not kosher, not prepared in the way that the Jewish people would need it to be prepared, and had probably been offered to idols too. It was also, if Daniel had said, I'm going to eat the food, it was an outward sign that he was willing to sit down to socialise and condone what the king was doing. And it was also the one thing of all these where there was an opportunity to compromise. So Daniel says to the chief who's in charge of him, please can we sit down and talk about this? And I want to say to you today that this is not a sort of decision that only happened thousands of years ago. These sort of decisions are going on every single day right now. And we cannot make excuses. We can't say things like, I'm the wrong age, or we can't say the things like, these type of things never happen. It's going on today. And I put these two pictures up here as examples of things that we in the church support. So we've got David and Faith in Yes Uganda, and we've got Nigel and Jan doing their work with the Ukraine. And what I'm guessing is, I don't know much about this work, other than I'm very happy to support it, but what I'm guessing is that somewhere, at some stage, those people looked at what was going on and said, no, enough is enough. That's where I'm going to draw the line, and I am going to do something about it. And that's what happens in this case with Daniel. What happens is, if you look at verse 8, this is the first couple of words that are really important. Daniel resolved. That is the first thing that happens. Daniel resolved. And if we want to make a difference in our world today, that's what we have to do. The first point is resolve. Daniel resolved. And he does it in a very special way. The first thing he does is he does it before the situation arises. Daniel had sat there, worked out all these changes and gone, what do I have to do and where do I draw the line? And he recognised that the food one was the one he could draw the line. And I think I can be pretty certain in saying he made that decision before the food arrived because of the conversation he has. He says, just give us 10 days. Let's work it out. Give us 10 days. If after 10 days we're okay, then fair enough. So he's understood it and he makes that resolution before the situation arises. It's so much easier to make the resolution before we are faced with the problem, if we can do that. The second thing he does is he does it in context. The thing he does makes a difference. It makes people sit up and take notice. He could have said, I refuse to wear the silly hat. I beg your pardon? I refuse to wear the silly hat. We're not asking you to wear a silly hat. I don't care whether you're asking me or not. I refuse to wear it. Okay, Daniel, if that's what you want to do, you carry on and refuse to wear the silly hat. It makes no difference to us. We're not asking. So when we are making a stand, it needs to be something that makes a difference. There is no point in us saying, I refuse to go into the new mosque that's in the high street in Bedbridge. Okay, there isn't a new mosque. I don't care if there is one or isn't one. I refuse to go in it. Doesn't make a lot of difference, does it really? So we have to do it on the context of where we are. Daniel picked a whole load of things that he didn't have a fight with. He knew he wasn't going to get anywhere. So he found a thing that could make a difference. And the other thing we need to do is we need to do it based on God's calling to us. I don't know a lot about what's going on in Uganda or the Ukraine. That's not what God has called me to do. God has called me to make my point and draw my line in certain positions, and that's right for me. And God will do the same for you. And this is why Daniel doesn't get a film of his life, because there are no twists in the tale. For the next 6 chapters, Daniel resolves, and he never goes back. Noah, it rained. That was a really interesting twist in the story. No one thought it was going to, but it rained. In Joseph, his brothers didn't recognise. Great twist in the story. In Samson, the temple actually falls down. No one expects it to. But from chapter 1, Daniel resolves, and he never goes back on what he asks to, what he says to do. Do you know the interesting thing is this, that actually up to this point, we don't need to be Christians to do this. There are lots of people who are doing this who have no faith in God at all. But if you do that, you will miss out on the next key part. And verse 9 says this, now God. And that's where it makes a huge difference. What does God do? God does 2 or 3 things here. First of all, he prepares the ground. If you look at verse 9, it says this: now God had caused, not God caused, but already had done this. God had already caused the official to show favour and compassion to Daniel. So God prepares the ground for us. And I'm sure if you talk to people who are going out to different countries and standing up, they will point you into the direction of stories that show that God was already there doing the work before these people have arrived. What God also does is he prepares his servants. And if you look at verse 15, it says at the end of 10 days they looked healthier and better nourished than any of the young men who ate the royal food. And the final thing God does in this story is he prepares to demonstrate his power. To these 4 young men, God gave knowledge and understanding of all kinds of literature and learning, and Daniel could understand visions and dreams of all kinds. And if you know anything about the next 6 chapters, you will know that that's going to become very, very important as we look at the story of Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach and Abednego. Then if you recognise this little logo in the bottom left-hand corner, some of you do, because I've seen at least one person with a cup with that bit on it. It's the logo of Lagon, the new coffee shop in town. If you've not been there, it's great coffee, really good coffee. Lagon is a Swedish word, I think it's a Swedish word, and it means balance in everything. Never too much, never too little, just about right. It's a brilliant word for a coffee shop. It's a rubbish word to describe God. God doesn't do those sorts of things in balance. He is far greater than that. If you look back at verse 15, at the end of the 10 days, the young men didn't look as healthy or a little bit less healthy. They looked healthier and better nourished than any of the young men who ate the raw food. And if you go to verse 20, it says this: the king eventually meets these 4 young men. When the king meets these 4 young men in verse 20, he questions them. And verse 20 says this: in every matter of wisdom and understanding about which the king questioned them, he found them pretty good. At least as good as everybody else. A little bit better than everybody else. God doesn't do that long. He found them 10 times better than anybody else in the whole kingdom. So my challenge to you today is to become a Daniel. To decide where you are going to draw the line. To allow God to work in you. And to prepare to be amazed. So, be a Daniel.